Welcome to They Tried to Bury Us. My name is Tamer, Kattan. I'll be your host. I'm a comedian, a writer, and an actor. I was born in Egypt and moved to America when I was just a kid, so I'm very proud of being an immigrant. And ever since I started doing comedy, I've met more and more immigrants, and I have found more and more amazing stories, and that's what this podcast is all about. Each week, I'm going to have a new guest. They're going to sit down and share with us their American origin stories, and we're going to get to know each other better, and we're going to find out that we're all just the same. So tune in each week, tell every single person you know, and thanks for listening. Funny guy. My dad was not, and he did not care for me being funny. He didn't like it at all. But my grandfather was known for this. He would dance with glasses of whiskey on his head in Egypt and stuff. He was a weirdo, and I think my dad kind of resented the fact that because he joked around all the time and had all these friends, he didn't spend enough time with him.
And his dad was the life of the party. So he never got to be the one who was cool and fun. Yeah,
exactly. So then. So he passes away. Everybody's at my grandfather's funeral. And in Egypt, if you're a famous person or someone of high regard, there's a military band that plays at your funeral. So here, everybody's sitting at my grandfather's funeral, and all of a sudden, the military band shows up, and they all start to play. And everybody's looking around and starting to whisper to each other, is this supposed to happen? Is it why is the band here? And then one of my grandmother's friends looked at one of the soldiers as they stopped their first song, and he goes, "Who are you here for?" And then the guy goes, "Ahmed something something." And he goes, "You're at the wrong funeral." So even on his, and then they all just started laughing. It was such a great moment. Even on his deathbed, he made them all laugh at his funeral. And it's exactly what he would have done if he was alive.
Oh, I was so nervous I was going to take a turn being like, oh no, he was a hitman for, who was the very famous president of Egypt? He died in the plane crash. He was the one that... not Farouk.
Not Farouk. Not King Farouk. Then there was Anwar Sadat got assassinated.
Sadat was the one that unified the Middle East basically. Yeah. He was the one that was basically sitting on Gaddafi, and Gaddafi kept listening to him. Gaddafi would be like, "I'm gonna get a bunch of virgins, they'll be my bodyguards, and I'm gonna live in a tent." Sadat was like, "How about you just keep the oil? It's a good idea though. Let's table that." I think it might have been Sadat or Nasser.
It was Nasser.
Nasser. It was Nasser.
It was Nasser. Yeah,
I was he's in my head. He's like, "Oh no, he was a hitman for Nasser. He was going around the world taking people's thumbs."
Yeah, it's funny. My Egyptian history is such shit. That was almost embarrassing. I knew who you were talking about because he had very Cuban communist revolution photographs of him. I remember those, but it was absolutely Nasser. He was the guy that kind of unified all of the Middle East. Sadat was Sadat was my generation. I was born when Sadat was in power.
Because Sadat was after. It was, I don't know. I find Egypt and the Middle East very interesting. My family all worked in politics. I'm from the capital of Canada, so how it was just not the family business, but if some towns make cars, Ottawa makes politics. So when you're a kid there, you're just aware of all this stuff. And my uncle was a diplomat. And I wasn't raised in a house where it's there's kids table and adult tables. All the kids had to sit with the adults.
I like that.
And
that's cool.
And it's all that happens is they're like, "Oh, this is who Castro is. It's a bit weird. All right, so listen, and it's just, so I have this weird semi-knowledge of world politics and events, but there's so many big gaps. Where it's like, the fella with he had the mutant hand and his wife committing suicide. Someone has to be like, Stalin? And be like, yeah. I'm like, why did you say leader of Russia? I don't know.
All right, speaking of weird, I'm going to do the world's weirdest intro because we forgot to.
Oh, we haven't even started. Good.
But this is perfect. This is exactly why I had you on the show is because.
And also the thing with podcasts that does drive me crazy is who doesn't look at the with guests? Not to say don't do the intro, but it always was like, we haven't told who the guests are. And it's like, just look at your phone. It says there in giant letters who it is.
Well, I want it to feel normal.
I know.
I feel like a natural conversation.
We're all trying to just do a radio show.
It's tricking us. It's tricking us into having a normal conversation, whatever that means between two comedians. I actually think we met in such a cool way.
Oh, we met in it's now not a cool neighborhood, but we met in the last cool neighborhood in London.
That's right, Camden Yards at what do they call it? The Horse Hospital.
It's in the Horse. So England's fucked, but Camden is a very cool area.
This is John Hastings.
Hi, everyone.
comedian that I met in London from Canada, phenomenal comedian, now in Los Angeles. Watch his comedy. His first show here, he got heckled by Dennis Rodman. We're going to talk about that later in the episode. It's so funny and so brave the way you handled that, by the way. This guy's a great comic. I saw him in London. We always just met at shows.
Yeah,
very briefly.
Very classic comedian interaction of just like, all right, yeah, and you just sort of chat and bullshit. Because it's a weird thing about stand up is like you do your spot and then you end up just stood next to where homeless people peed, just playing grab ass for 4 hours.
Yeah, it's so grimy.
And it's like we all have money. We could go to a bar or a coffee shop.
Yeah.
No, we'll stand outside.
Yeah.
In
We're
the wind.
barely, you know what we are? You know those dogs that they breed with wolves? So they're like, yeah, that's a dog. And you go, yeah, it's a little bit kind of wild. I could see in the eyes. I feel like a lot of comics are like that. Like I flinch when people hug me sometimes.
Yeah, well, I always get very annoyed at the sort of benevolent disorder nonsense talk of stand-up because I always think I'm like, no, we just, the way we brought up or whatever is we reacted and couldn't go and do certain things, so we end up doing other things. But the funny thing about stand-up is all of the goals, even though it's so many people are like, damn the man, no office job for me. All of the trajectory is you're going back in an office. Like you talk to any stand-up, they're like, I want a TV show. And it's like you're going to be in an office for like 10 hours talking to suits. There's no leather jacket at a TV studio, brother. It's the funniest thing about it. But on that like pure level of in a club, yes, it is like. It's gangsters who are too nervous to break any of the rules, but still have all of the weird traditions and like nicknames and stuff like that. Yeah.
There were so many metaphors in that rant.
I love it. I don't actually know what I was talking about midway through.
Well, here's what I met you in London. We're both comics. And then I found out you moved here. Yeah, and even in London, you had all this great material about being a Canadian in London, and I was. There are not a lot of Americans there. There aren't a lot of American comedians.
It's happening now. Is I think Americans, as always, which happens with any sort of scene, is people slowly, like yourself, you had to tell people it was fun.
Oh, sorry.
So now it's all right. But I left it. But it's I think Americans are going now, especially to the Edinburgh Festival, because it's another place to perform, and the world's getting so much smaller.
Yeah.
Where this idea of like you got to be in LA to make it in LA is just not coming true. Like you be in LA because you like LA. If not, go live somewhere else and just fly in every couple of months.
Exactly, and do comedy, make your
exactly. Art. And yeah, so there isn't that many Americans in the UK. But what brought you over there? First off,
well, for me it was a crazy story. Like I basically had just started comedy. It was after my dad died. But you know what? I'm going to get into that later. I'm going to talk about you, and I'm going to specifically talk about one thing in particular. Like this show's called "They Tried to Bury Us," and it's the front part of a famous Mexican saying. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. To me, the whole immigration process has always been fascinating. Because I came here when I was a kid, and all the stuff that I hated, the getting picked on, having to work harder than other people had to get the same thing, all that stuff I hated. But it ended up making me feel like, it actually made me stronger. And so I always empathize when I see other people that are immigrating or going through the process. And when I saw you, like you had a Canadian in England, and now you're a Canadian in America, I'm like, I gotta talk to John about the differences.
Oh, there's a lot. The immigration process, I think, is very interesting because as much as we talk about in society that everyone's very forward thinking and stuff like that, especially in the West and North America, I will say is way better than England in particular, not the rest of the British country, Wales a little bit, but England in particular is not a place that really welcomes outsiders. And I went there in 2012, which was 4 years after their economic crash, but they still had something called austerity measures, which basically means government's not spending any money. Everything is frozen. And so it was just a very closed shop. So what you say is like,
was that based on the economy?
It was based completely on the economy, and then that was trickling down to everything in show business and all that sort of stuff. And there's still a place that it was a lot of like crossed arms, you're not welcome, this sort of thing. And it's just, it's very interesting because the perception of America is white privilege, but perception of America is this like big behemoth, no one's welcome. There is like once you're on the other side of that wall, I find America a very welcoming place. I'm not a brown person or a black person, so I have a different perspective. Well, England, I don't give a fuck about your skin color. You're not English, you are below us. And if an English person was here, they would go, that's not true. And like any of those conversations, then you point out the 5 examples and they'll go, well, that was just your experience. And I go, I will go find 40 Australians and 50 Canadians and we'll have the same story.
Yeah.
But that spurred on the ability and made me actually sort of, work and stand up and work as a job, because it was the first time it wasn't social, because they were sort of off over there. And it was a weird kind of benefit because it made it so you actually have to treat stand up like a job. That's what no one tells you. It's like, you want to get successful? Like, don't get drunk every night. And actually, like,
if you want to get rid of your day job, you have to work harder than you ever worked at your day job.
And you also have to do really, really crazy things. Like, that thing that you riffed that was funny? You have to make sure you've recorded it, and then you have to write it down and say it 100 more times before it's as funny as the first time you said it.
Exactly.
And all those things. But the immigration experience is bizarre, because you learn so much about bureaucracy. You learn so much about how governments work. I think if
Did you accidentally say bureaucracy?
I think
like
I
Barack Obama's brand of bureaucracy?
That's that was the president I was told I was getting when I moved here. I thought,
what a bait and switch.
2015. I started this process in 2015. I get called a month before Trump is elected, and I'll never forget my lawyer said, all right, if Hillary gets in, you'll be interviewed and you'll be coming in by 2017. Who knows if Trump gets in, but that's not going to happen. Trump got in, and it was a full year and 2 months until they could interview me to get me in the green card process. And by the way, if you ever believe in conspiracy theories, immigrate to a new country, can't possibly. You see how inefficient they are. How none of it makes any sense. No one knows what's going on.
Yeah.
There's no way that these people are being run by the elders of Zion or lizard people.
So true. It's the definition of too many chefs in the kitchen. Not all their processes are too fatty, too slow, too unorganized. I agree with you. It's really hard to believe that a government can come up with a sly execution of almost anything.
Yeah, they would it would be perfectly well organized and oiled if it was like, there's actually no democracy here and it's just like this. Because they wouldn't have, like, one of the big problems that's happening in America is because of how Trump has structured his government. There's like there's no ambassadors anywhere. They're not reporting this, but it's destroying the immigration process and the State Department because they have no one there, and you need ambassadors and diplomats on the ground. So like, let's use an example of Syria. You need the guy in Syria who's the ambassador who can go knock on Assad's door and be like, come over for tea. Stop fucking gassing people or we're going to fucking kill you. Yeah. Enjoy the tea though. Like, and they don't have that anymore.
It's just, it's a funny thing. Everybody says we wanted someone who's not a politician. I'm like, that's a terrible thing to want, because it's going to cause all these problems. There's subtleties in the political world, just like there are in everything else. And I think a lot of the subtleties of having people on the ground in the right places, all that other stuff, it's critical. But I still want to talk about you.
Bring it on. Yeah.
What made you want to immigrate? It's much more common in Canada than it is here. But what made you choose the route of leaving Canada?
Purely work-based. Is that Canada is an amazing place if you're not in show business. If you're in show business, it's an incredibly tiny pool. You're going back and forth across the country. It's really fun because you're with friends, but you're not making a lot of money, and you're doing the same sort of thing all the time. And I felt myself you're around a lot of bitter old dudes that will tell you stories of like, I remember Norm Macdonald. I always did better than him.
Wow.
And you hear those words, and it's one of those things where it's like, that's probably true. You probably did do better than Norm Macdonald.
Yeah.
But I didn't like there was the way it was said. It was said with this like bitterness of like, he fucking cheated the system. It should have been me. And it's like, who told you show business was fair? This is always, I don't know where I learned this early on, but I was like, it's the most unfair business in the world.
It absolutely is. You're right.
So you just have to do things that are nice. And I was like, I'm kind of sick of traveling Canada. I wanted to see the world. I was told the rest of the world is booked out of England. I can get a visa for $300 for 2 years to just live there, no questions asked. Let's go do that and see what happens. And I did it, and 2 years turned into 6 years just because it was this amazing scene and this huge, giant international circuit. Like, I got to go all over the world.
And talk about like being inspired. Like I think you'd already been in the UK for a few years before I moved there.
2014, I think we figured out.
Yeah, I think
about
so.
2 years.
And so what was it like for you when you first got there? What was different? Because for me, the big difference was exposure to comedians from all over Europe and all over the world, and that really changed the way.
There's sort of two big differences. The one was the professional difference was in North America, stand-up is predominantly dudes stood in front of a wall talking into a microphone. At the time in 2012, and this is going away.
You mean in Canada it was like that?
In Canada, it was very much like that.
Yeah.
And it was this big sort of like dude fucking weirdness. Some stories, but and then you go to the UK, and the UK was everything. Stand-up is our catch-all generic genre term for you're going to watch an individual in a room do something for up to and including an hour.
Sure.
And that at 25, 26 was kind of mind-blowing because you're like, oh, it could be sort of anything and you can push the boundaries. And that led me to do some stuff that was, as it turned out, stuff I couldn't do or wasn't actually out of my business doing, but I could try it and in an environment where you wouldn't fall down. And that was amazing. And also the idea of traveling around the world and you see different places getting stand-up scenes. Like I was the second ever Canadian comedian to play in Iceland, and going and seeing Iceland and how they react to stand up. I had to do a gig in a town that was 200 people, 40 people showed up, 30 of them spoke English, and then 10 of them didn't. So I had to stop after every joke and they would translate. And it's bizarre, but you're like, oh, this is cool and interesting. But it's such a culture shift. Like America and Canada are.
But can I say something real quick? Like, see, that story brings so much joy to me. Oh, it's so awesome. Like, that's the human experience. And it kills me that stories like that about a positive exchange of two different people being from two different cultures, that it should be a fun thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's become like this source of such tension for a lot of different immigrants. I don't get it.
I don't understand. I think a lot of it is people just need to travel more.
Yeah.
And also travel more and don't travel like Hilton, Ramada. Like Airbnb is a great gift. Airbnb is great. Every country has it. It's pretty much efficient. Go and live in the city even for a week and it will change your perspective on the entire thing. Like I've been to, Dubai, Qatar, and Bahrain. And there was an amazing insight on, because it's the Middle East, but it's not the Middle East. It's the Middle East that they will be like,
it's a big expat community.
Giant expat community. But what I saw was just because, especially in Qatar and Bahrain, it's very, very strict Muslim rule. And I even saw, like, you see their little workarounds.
Oh, God.
Because human beings always will find the, technically, Allah is totally fine with this. I found this little workaround, which was, we were in where the gig was, the top 5 floors were women having a party, and it's a country where the full hijab, pardon me, all the way down. And then what we found out, we were talking to one of the porters because it was only females up there. Goes, oh no, as soon as they go up there, they take it off and they're in like gold bikinis and crazy hair and all this sort of stuff. And all the certain windows are left open, and their husbands or men are across the street, and everyone's walking, look out the window and see and I was like, the amount of levels you've gone just for this workaround, I'm like, oh, we're all the same. Because I guarantee
100%.
You put those rules, and I'm sure Mormon cultures that are very strict have the exact same little tricks.
100%.
And it was that amazing sort of like, no, there's no difference in the entire world. We're very much out of the West, and still it's like, I'm looking good. My boyfriend's going to know how good I look. We just need to rent 2 buildings to do it. It's the same.
It's exactly right. Especially now with technology. I was in Saudi Arabia one time, and
what was that like? That was
insane. When I say insane, I mean it as very foreign. Yeah, even for me as an Egyptian, it was very foreign.
Because that same trip, because Qatar, I think, is across the bridge from Saudi Arabia. Qatar, Bahrain, one of the two. And they warned us. They were like, oh, if the Saudis come over, just watch out, because they come here to drink.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to drink. So they just know from music and culture, like Hennessy, Johnny Walker. And what they'll do is they'd have 2 tables in a hotel, and the drinks would be at this table, and they'd walk behind, like they're going to the washroom, and do like a round of shots. And they're nice guys, but they're hammered, and they're 40. Yeah. They're millionaires, and they've never been drunk before.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, there's a lot of people that have secret stashes You know, like in Egypt, for example, we were allowed a certain amount of booze, and it was that kind of stuff. That kind of dude. I remember being a kid, and I'm not that old, where we had sugar rationing. You know, like there was a limit to how much booze you could get. There was a rationing for sugar. Walking into a regular grocery store for me is just like an immigrant walking into Times Square.
I like being Canadian. I remember when there was fruits and like this sounds crazy and like it's too old men winters, but I remember the grocery store didn't have stuff because it's like it's winter. We don't have oranges in winter.
Yeah, exactly.
What, are you drunk? No.
Yeah, it's so
Like the idea that the avocado is a perfunctory item in every grocery store is a 21st century product. Like I do not in the 90s. There was none of this guacamole like that didn't exist. And people think I'm crazy.
I'm still on perfunctory.
But as you go, I've been to Iceland. I was in Iceland and they have avocados, and then I was like, "There's this. This was on a plane. We're not close to anything where this came from."
It's a nice thing to feel like we're all connected.
Yeah.
And the people that keep trying to make us feel like we're all so completely different. Every time I speak to someone who's immigrated, I don't care if they're a white person, a brown person, a black person, if they're whatever, their similarities are always the same. The motivations are 99% of the time, the motivations are the same. The fears are the same, different to different degrees, of course. And the experiences are almost identical.
Of course, because it's in the end, human beings are human beings. There's no matter the circumstance that changes, it always results in the same things because we're at the base, a certain type of animal that's evolved a certain way. So every society is going to have like exactly what you're saying, stashes in the same way. Everyone's got those little workarounds.
Yeah.
And it's the fun thing of travel, of discovering that and finding that and being, because that makes you feel, I find makes me feel at home because it's like, my idiot friends would do this too. If we were in Bahrain, I'd be getting a call, we cracked it.
So let me ask you this. When you're in I think a lot of times Americans are surprised by what they hear about our reputation outside of America. And I'm wondering, when you were in England and you said, I'm moving to America, you're very much a part of the London comedy scene.
Yeah.
People love you and know you. And you said, I'm moving to America. What kind of responses did you
I didn't tell anyone. This is probably shouldn't say this on a podcast. I didn't tell anyone for a specific career reason, which was I didn't want to go out of sight, out of mind.
Smart.
Because the thing is you're on the road all the time anyway. So I was like, I'm just going to do this on the QT.
Yeah.
Saying this on a podcast, this isn't a great idea.
It's new.
Yeah. And see how long I'll still stay in people's minds. And it's worked pretty good. And so that was the sort of thing I told friends, and they were like, is now when you really want to go because of Trump? But I was like, motherfuckers, you guys did Brexit. Trump's got max 6 years left. And let's see how that goes. Because he hasn't had a Hurricane Katrina. He hasn't had a 9/11. He hasn't had
Puerto Rico was pretty bad.
Puerto Rico's pretty bad, but here's the real problem is Puerto Rico was enough out of sight is because of the way the structure of it is a state, but it's not a state.
I hate to say it, but I feel like Katrina's coming. I don't feel like we're well prepared for any kind of.
I agree. And by the way, we are now 13 years on from Katrina. For it to happen again.
Yeah.
And he didn't actually have people that knew what they were doing in the White House. That's the thing, is that's going to be the end of Trump, I feel. Or who knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
Maybe Oprah runs in 2020. That said, Brexit in Britain, for people that don't know what it is Britain is voted to leave the European Union. And what that basically did was it destroyed the last industry that Britain had, England specifically, which was finance. They held the world's debt because their currency was so strong. That's gone. So now they don't have an industry. All the European companies, if they don't have a deal, are pulling out.
Which is crazy.
And so much of their population are European who won't have permission to work there.
So there's all these companies across Europe that have relationships, and they even count on each other for supply chains. And
exactly.
Like that. And then the country of England is going in and saying enough people are voting that no more, we don't want to have these relationships happening the way that they've been happening.
And not only that, they didn't understand that going into the negotiations, the European Union, like anything in a negotiation, you've been in the business world, I've been in the business world, we've negotiated. What do you need in negotiation? Leverage. Yeah. Here's how you get leverage. We're all these countries, we have the trade deals, we have everything, you need us. We don't fucking need you. You're doing this. And they went, no. And they went, no, you don't understand. This is not a negotiation. You do these things.
Yeah, or you're out.
Or you go fuck yourself. And England has spent 2 years going, no. And Europe has spent 2 years going, you don't understand. And now in March, England's in trouble. Like the Bank of England has effectively said house prices are going to drop by a half in a day.
Whoa.
Get ready. And everyone's going, well, the government's going to do something about it. And they keep being like, no, they
don't have leverage.
They did this.
Yeah.
So friends of mine that did say, oh, you're going to America at this
It is interesting
time.
that we have governments create these problems and then we look for them to solve
it.
The problems.
Well, it's a mommy-daddy relationship of like, well, they'll figure it out. But saying people going like, well, Trump's America, I'll go, yeah, but Trump's going to last only so long. You guys have made a decision that's forever.
Yeah.
And also, like anything, America's a very different place on the ground because of states, and California isn't America.
It's so funny. I say this a lot. Like America, we're too big.
Yeah,
we should be at minimum 4 different countries. We really should. Like, and we probably mixed up a little bit. I like California, New York to get a little closer, but like
you need Chicago in there.
You need Chicago.
Yeah, like it should be sort of a diagonal, like that would be good.
Yeah.
The Pacific Northwest, I find, is so crazy different to California.
Yeah, definitely.
And weirdly, I found like California and Texas oddly similar in that their commuter cultures. A lot more multicultural than they're really letting anyone know.
You know an awful lot about America.
Well, my dad's lived in America on again, off again my entire life. So I just
gotcha.
I visited a lot, and especially Texas was the big surprise because he lives in Houston, and you're walking down the street and you're like, I was told this was cowboy land, and it's like every third restaurant's an Indian restaurant.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, no, that's bullshit. It's Texas is giant immigrant population. They just keep electing white people and they don't want to talk about it. I don't know. What are you going to do?
So did you know you wanted to come to America as a kid?
I wanted to come to America once I got into show business because I was like, well, that's all my dreams were here.
It's so interesting.
And I went to England as a way to beef up my visa process. For those of you who don't know, to get into the UK or to the US rather, as a comedian or any type of entertainer, there's a variety of visas you have to try and get. The biggest one is you have to apply for a green card self-sponsored. So you basically have to prove on paper with evidence you're more qualified to be a comedian than an American person. So the benefit of going to the UK is you can show, well, I've performed in all of these countries and I can get you letters from all of these producers. And here's, because there's a press culture in Europe, and here's reviews from all of these places. So you really beef yourself up and they can look and go like, oh, okay, so I came here on a green card because in the end, as much as everything you want to say, oh, there's amazing scenes in the UK and Australia, like this is where you want to do stand-up is it's where it was invented.
Yeah.
Either here in New York or San Francisco.
I think we take that for granted here sometimes when we take for granted how hard other people are working and how far they're willing to come to get the things that are in our very own backyard.
Completely. And it's like you go to the comedy store.
That's not exclusive to comedy, by the way.
No, absolutely not.
Across the board in this country.
And it's America invented all the cool things. Credit cards, the car, stand-up comedy, punk rock, the threesome. I'm gonna give the threesome to America. Spring break.
He has a French name.
Yeah, but how
are you gonna give that to
I guarantee that was a Parisian person heard about it during World War II. Know that these are American. You don't know. It was definitely an American GI. This is what it was. It was an American GI in France. He had just stoved in a German guy's skull with his boot, and he was like, "All right, I need 2 French women to suck my dick." And then, okay, American, but we get the name it.
You had a fight, and I'm like, okay, now it feels like an American story.
That's exactly right. Well, it was World War II. It's not like he was over there just shopping for cheese. But also, the thing that Americans don't realize, I think they realize it, but American culture is world mainstream culture.
Yeah.
Like, Friends is fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
You can say Joey, Chandler, Rachel, Monica, and Phoebe, and Ross.
It's so true. It's so fun. I think that is more powerful than even our military. I don't mean our military servicemen. I mean like the collection of bombs. I think we're not impressive because of the military might necessarily, as much as we are for the influence that we have over culture because of all the things that have come out of Hollywood.
Absolutely, Hollywood music, like Kanye is known
and New York and all
around the world, like around the universe.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's just a very interesting thing of America, like has this bombacity sort of nature, but I think that there's more arrogant countries out there than America. There's more places that are more rah rah, we're number one. Then like America will
Get out of here.
Absolutely.
Who's more rah rah?
England. I guarantee you get an English person 2 cocktails in, and they will explain to you how England is better. I'm sorry, you go to the Middle East, and there was a bungload of those countries that'll be like number one.
The we're number one thing. I felt like we own that. I felt like we own that finger.
Yeah, but
we own the chant.
But here's the thing: is America will go like we're number one, but you can say to an American, well, what about this? And they'll go, yeah, you got a point there, but still number one. What I think is the defining of America more
this
than
is good.
anything.
I'm glad you're having a nice impression.
The interest, like, not to rain on your good impression.
No, this
is
nice. I like it.
I do find the 2 things I find interesting that are so uniquely American is God and the military, because those are the last 2 things that no other country is as into God and as into the military as like America. It is like exactly what you just did right there. Where it's like no disrespect to the servicemen.
Yeah, you're right.
That like in everywhere else is sort of like you're just doing a job too. Like it's such an interesting relationship.
Yeah. And
I don't know how to like how do you feel about it as an American but not born here?
I feel like it's in our DNA to be fighters, and I think that's like it's not just a thing we do as a service. I feel like it's a part of American identity. So I think people really grasp onto it. I mean, like we got this country through a fight, just like that the soldier you were describing that invented the menage a trois, right? So I think that's a part of it, and I think like like I went and performed in the Middle East a bunch for our troops, and it was like I had a really weird experience with military because my dad had PTSD and it affected him really negatively. And I didn't like the military. I'll be honest. I didn't like guns. I didn't like the military. And I felt like the soldiers got the rewards, but the families went through a whole bunch of shit too. And I didn't, what I mean? So I did not like it. But when I went and performed for the military, I went to Afghanistan, and that completely made me see like a part of America that I really, really loved. And a lot of it was this sense. For the first time, I'm like, that's what it means. That this is what patriotism is. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter if you're a male or female. It was a real feeling of brotherhood. Like when we were at those bases performing for those troops, brotherhood and sisterhood. And I was an only child. So for me, it was something like I felt in my body. I'm like, this is so nice. And it was like one of the first like really warm human feelings I got from the word patriotism, or people saying USA, USA, USA. As an immigrant, having had so many negative experiences with racism, I had this bittersweet relationship with patriotism. But the military base is the first place I'd been where it wasn't bittersweet. It made sense there. It didn't make sense on the street. Didn't make sense when you yelled it out to like a man that was skinning fish in Koreatown. Yeah, exactly. And that to me is more offensive than taking a knee. It's using like the really positive nature of what patriotism means, which is actually brotherhood and unity and people fighting the power, as opposed to like people siding with the power to fight your neighbor. That's not America to me.
That
was a rant.
It was great though. It's because it's that interesting sort of. It's why America's in a very interesting place now, is because of there's sort of this whole idea of like you're on this side or you're on that side. The idea that you can't be like, no, I can like the military, but also think that everyone should have like. I'm like, because people always accuse me of being. I actually am like, if you look at the definitions of left and right, I'm actually center right, because it's like I want me a good military, but also I want government paid for.
Why can no one say that sentence grammatically correct?
Which one?
Everybody says I want me a good military.
I want me some soldiers. Because listen, it sounds better. I would like a well-appointed military. Sounds like I got a plan.
It sounds more dangerous.
I want me a good military. You're like, oh, but we're gonna tie ourselves to the yellow ribbon around the old oak tree, make you some lemonade. Also, the idea that Southern people are very stupid, bit of a misnomer, invented Gothic poetry and jazz. I had that yelled at me by a Louisiana man in a bar 4 nights ago.
That's actually pretty badass.
I know, because I was just doing it as a joke. And literally was just like, would let you know that actually the South. And I was like, it's a fair point, my man.
Well, that's a perfect segue to people yelling at you while on bars. So,
oh boy, they love it. Particularly one man.
Well, when I was looking you up, like I've been a fan for a long time. Like when we first met, I thought your material was really smart, really funny. And then I looked you up here, and I didn't know this because We chatted really briefly because we keep bumping into each other at shows. So we chatted briefly, but
and
then
I don't really bring up times I've been heckled by celebrities.
Exactly. So I love that it was titled my first comedy show in America. You did your first comedy show in America, and you got heckled by
Dennis Rodman. So
Dennis Rodman.
I was at the Comedy Store doing the warm up spots before roast battles. You know how they have like 10 spots before. So you guys don't know, there's the Comedy Central show, Roast Battles. That's the spinoff of a show they do every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday at midnight,
For Tuesday at midnight in LA. At 10:30, they do 90 minutes of stand-up as sort of a lead-in.
Exactly.
Audience is getting in, warming up. And this was like right when it was at its like most like, this is the show in LA. And I was fucking a lad in the city. I had no idea. I just met Brian in a car at Just for Laughs and just be like, can I do your show? And Dennis Rodman is there. And the audience is not watching the show. They're watching Dennis Rodman. And Dennis Rodman is heckling every comedian.
Of course he
and
is.
I'm new to LA. I'm coming from the UK, which is
it's your first show.
It was. I lied, by the way. It was not my first show, but it was my first show in a comedy club. So I allow myself that.
Sure, no, that makes sense. Yeah, it's exciting. You're like, and it's not just a club; it's the club.
It's the Comedy Store,
and it's kind of the show. You know, the show right before Roast Battle. Roast Battles
is the show that essentially like helped pull that start and get that club to be like. You walk in there now, and like if that blows up. Show business is going to need a month to recover.
Well, Rogan too. I got to give credit to Rogan.
It's Rogan, but like you go in there and it's like Rogan is doing 10 minutes, followed by Ron White, followed by Bill Burr, followed by Whitney Cummings, followed by Krista Lee. Like you look at those lineups and you're like,
amazing, yeah.
Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah.
So here you couldn't be more excited.
I could be more excited. And I've been downstairs and I'd walked by like a bunch of these guys. I peeked in and watched Bill Burr work on new stuff. I'm like, this is fucking cool. You're here. I go upstairs and Dennis Rodman is heckling these other comedians. And here's the difference of a lot of, if you come up in LA as opposed to coming up in the UK, is LA comedy is very much like, I'm going to do my set. Nothing's going to stop my set because, and it's a smart idea, is because people could be watching and they're not looking at, did he do well in this room? They're going, will that work
on TV?
On TV.
Oh, that's such a great observation. You're so right.
And that works 90% of the time, that's the right thing to do. But 10% of the time, you got a heckler, the room is weird, there's rats on the stage, all of these things I've experienced here, or Dennis Rodman is yelling at you. Stop doing your act and go after Dennis Rodman because it's ruining the show. And the other thing is, I'm a big wrestling fan, and I knew everyone's going to talk about his basketball, but if I bring up that might quiet him.
Yeah. Can I say something before you continue?
Sure.
I've seen a lot of people handle hecklers before. And if you're a comic and you want some advice on how to handle hecklers, listen in, because this was the best I've ever seen anybody handle a heckler. You made an entire show out of it. It was fucking brilliant. Well, so go ahead. Continue.
It's a couple of things. It's also
so good.
I host a show during the Edinburgh Fringe called Late and Live, which starts at 1 a.m.
An insane show.
And there's a lot of threats of violence. There's a lot of sort of stuff like
Eddie
that.
Pepitone walked off stage. 1 year.
Yes.
He's like, I can't do this.
It's crazy. It's gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
And I'm not one for blowing smoke in my own ass, but I will credit myself as one of the people that have crawled that show back from essentially being where people went to vomit to, okay, it's a bit of a combative relationship, but it's just, I've done it enough and dealt with enough hecklers where I know, and this is for any comic listening, here's how you do it. It's very simple. You let them talk more because you have all the advantages. You got a microphone, so you don't need to yell. You're 9 times out of 10 not drunk and they're drunk. Also, everyone wants you to win because in the definition of what everyone's watching, you're the performer and they're the shithead.
Yep.
Just don't be a shithead and you'll eventually win. And also, in the end, just call for security. And then when they leave, and if the audience really hates you, explain, hey, you guys paid money and he was interrupting the show. The reason why that wasn't going well is because of his energy. And they'll all go, all right, and then just say a funny joke and you'll look like
100%.
Plan.
100%. You're absolutely right. Everybody's on your side and wants you to win.
So in that situation, a couple of things happen for the video that it's a cartoon, so you can't see because it's literally off my phone in my pocket because I was just recording my set.
Yeah.
It's fine, but a couple of things you can't see is the entire audience. As soon as I tell him to shut, like Dennis Rodman, the whole audience looks at him, and he kind of gets a bit sideways because I don't think he realized that this could happen. We keep going back and forth, and then you'll hear him go, "Can I do one thing? Can I do one thing?" He gets up, and you can't tell, but the audience was a bit like, "Oh Jesus fucking
I was
Christ,
tense listening to
what's going to happen?" And he walked on stage, and he immediately grabbed me, sort of the way you'd grab a kitten being bad, back of the neck. And Dennis Rodman's been drinking and doing drugs for some time, but he still was a professional athlete for a long time. And
big, scary looking dude.
I'm 6'4", and he was towering over me. And he says, "Why are you?" I think we didn't cut this out because it went long, and because some of the stuff you couldn't understand what he was saying. But I think at one point he goes, "Why are you shaking?" And it's because he was literally
he said, "Why are you shaking?"
Because I'm like, if he wants to, I'm dead right now. But at the same time, I'm like, this is a friend of mine's show. I'm at the Comedy Store. I can't let fucking Dennis Rodman win.
And you know what was so brilliant that I thought is when he came up to give you a hug, noticed that you were shaking, and in that situation, it's almost like the heckler's starting to win. He's got this thing on you, and he's like, "Why are you shaking?" But you gave such an honest answer that it was hilarious, and people stayed on your side
because it's true, and it's also
because I'm so scared.
And it also just worked that he gave me the best line that'll let me slam him down, which he goes, "Well, I'm famous," and right there, and I remember thinking, okay, you're gonna say you used to be famous. If he swings, get the fuck out of here and call TMZ. Like, get on TMZ right and be like, you will make your career. And then I did
such a crazy job.
And then he said it, and I said it, and big laugh. And then
such a brave thing to say. But
what you don't see, which was the best part and shows his smart, is he laughed too.
Yeah.
Because if he hadn't, that would have gone the other way. And then he hugged him. He walked off. And then I left. I went to go to another show like every fucking ego comedian. I don't stay there. And what I miss, and which I wish I had captured, is with two women who apparently got so pissed off at it, they started fighting each other. And the three of them got kicked out of the Comedy Store.
No way.
Yeah. And there was some implication they were professional women. I have no evidence of that either way. I heard that from a door guy at the Comedy Store, which is not a reliable source of information.
Sure. But I just thought it was so brave. I mean, even you telling him to sit down. And listen, I know that you guys aren't hearing this. So what we're gonna do is after the podcast is up, and if you're listening to the podcast, we'll put a link to the video if you'd like. It's an audio, but you made a really cool cartoon.
Yeah, my buddy Steve Patrick Adams animated the whole thing for me because it was just too. It was too good to have.
100%. It was so great.
My favorite part was my buddy Graham, who's a great comedian, Graham K. Check him out. I went and met him for a very classic comedian move, which is to eat a giant meal at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And he was like, "What do you mean he heckled you?" And I was like, "Dennis Rodman heckled me." And then I played him the audio, and he was just like, "Yeah, but who's going to believe you that it was Dennis Rodman?" And it's my favorite point being like, you're actually a genius. Because if it was anyone else of the Golden Triangle, if it was Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, you'd be like, it's not Scottie Pippen. You just thought it was just a tall black guy. But as soon as you say Dennis Rodman, everyone's like, it had to have been Dennis Rodman.
Yeah. And his voice, everybody has heard what a drunk filter sounds like on a regular Dennis Rodman voice. It couldn't be anybody else but him.
It's crazy that, because what has he done since? He's done nothing since those games.
You know what's funny is there's a really great Instagram account called Fuck Jerry. And they created Fuck Jerry News, and on Fuck Jerry News, they now have Dennis Rodman reading like stock exchange updates. And he has no clue what he's talking about. He's all Ford is down. That's crazy. I had a Ford F-150. It was a great truck.
Oh my God.
I don't know why the stock's down. What's the funniest thing I've ever heard?
What's even more nutty about him is apparently he didn't start, like he wasn't like a high school basketball prodigy. He just was playing in the streets when he was like 18, and he was so good. Like a college recruiter called someone, and he just ended up in, like, it's like, how fucking
so crazy.
He's like, there's something in his brain of like, he's just good at one thing. Like being in society, being a normal person, all of that is faded away. Yeah. He's good at taking a ball and putting it in a basket.
Yeah.
It's got to be a weird life.
Yeah, I feel like all of us have some kind of form of autism, right? Focus on one thing and stay on that one thing. I don't even know why we're on the planet, John. I don't even know why we're
we
here.
can start pulling at those threads. It's a very different podcast.
It's weird. It's a weird thing. Hold on, let me make sure.
You should check
Okay,
his
so let me
Apple
ask you
Watch.
this. One, I'm really happy you're in America. I think you're a phenomenal comic. I think you're going to add so much to the scene.
I hope so.
And how long have you been here? How long have you been?
I came for a final, like, are you going to do this scouting mission of May and June?
Mhm.
And then I was like, all right, you're doing this. Last bags, get them over September the 3rd. So I've been here since September the 3rd.
Wow, so you're pretty new.
Very new.
Very new.
Don't even own a car in LA, everybody. That's how new I am.
Very impressive. You actually met me here by bicycle.
I do live literally 4 minutes away.
Oh, awesome.
But it's not that bad. It's bad, but it's not as bad as advertised because of the new West Side rail link. You can actually get to
you use public transportation
all the time.
So it's you, homeless people, and Swedish students.
Yeah, but Tamer, here's the difference. I absolutely believe in some form of racial privilege, but more importantly, I believe in height privilege, which I have, which is I live in a different world than anyone. I'm 6'4" and I am big.
That's
and
true.
It's not that I haven't been mugged, but I know that like this guy needed to mug some. No one. Muggers who are out there professional are like, it will just be annoying if it turns out he knows how to fight. And I don't know how to fight, which I need to stop telling people. But I just look like I'm enough of a problem that they're not going to do anything. And also, who's robbing a guy on a bike in LA? We could rob a guy on a bike, or we can drive 5 minutes and we'll have a Tesla.
Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah.
Impervious.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're
Although
safe.
I was biking through Inglewood, which I've been told is gentrified and it's very noticeable, but it's that level of gentrification where you're like, it's to right here, other side, so long, sailor. And I got a bit of a spidey sense. And a couple of times I was like, I might have wanted to get an Uber.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not. We're lucky to be guys. I forget sometimes. I was in Chicago one time, and I was dating a girl at the time, and I'd finished a show and called her, let her know how it went, and I had a good show. I'm starting to walk through town, and she's like, "What are you doing right now?" And I said, "Oh, I'm walking back to the hotel." And she goes, "You're walking to the south side of Chicago?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And she goes, "Oh." She's like, "Oh, you're so lucky to be a guy sometimes." And I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about it, but she's right. Like she wouldn't have felt as comfortable walking through the street. Even some of my guy friends wouldn't have felt as comfortable. It's nice to be a little bit bigger boned.
Yeah.
I don't know that I deserve it, but it is very basic when it comes to crime. They go back to being cave people and they size you up the way cave people would size each other up.
It sounds so stupid, but the Me Too movement, when it sort of, which by the way, it's only been a year, everybody, because it's good too far. For me, it was so crazy, which was watching all of the women that were in my life be not surprised by it, because I was like, can you believe this? And they were like, yes. And I was like, and that's the same thing. And that was my sort of realization of like, oh, I've never been in I've been in a bad neighborhood for everyone else. But for me, it's where people are just like, what the fuck is he doing here? And that's and that's what I like about, I think we are moving forward as a society. I think the world is getting smaller. And the problem with history and everything like that is it puts things in a perspective of it was easy. Like, if you go and look at what happened in America in the 60s and the 70s, like 68 to 72, people were hijacking planes, blowing up planes, or blowing up each other every week.
Yeah, you're right.
Like we're in Koreatown right now in the in LA.
You're right.
Did you watch that LA 92 documentary that's on Netflix?
100%. I was here when it happened. And Koreatown, where we are now, there were a lot of Korean store owners that were on the roofs of buildings with rifles. And you're right. I mean, what you're saying is funny because I have a friend who's a social psychologist, and he said, don't let the news affect you the way it's affecting you, because he noticed it was. Yeah. And I said, why not? And he said, because you don't measure the progress of humanity in 4-year blocks. Yeah. But that's what politics makes you think. Yeah, so you measure the progress of humanity in 100-year blocks. So if you want to see if we've taken a step forward or step backward, look at it in 100-year blocks. How has life changed for gay people? How has life changed for women? How has life changed for immigrants, etc.? Can we take a step back during that 100-year block? Absolutely, but you can't look at it like that. Like it's a very slow, giant moving ship. And you can't let it drive you insane.
And it's just the amount of, he's completely right. Like the amount of progress that a place like Los Angeles, where you put it in
I
context.
love the way you say progress, by the way.
Listen,
Very nice.
It was called education.
It's like you're speaking in cursive.
Yeah. What was so annoying about that excellent joke? There's a huge portion of the audience that won't understand it because they stopped teaching cursive.
You're right. They don't teach cursive
They
anymore?
don't. My brother's 15. He doesn't, because I only write in cursive because I was fucking, it was drummed into my stupid head. This is how you write. It's faster. And now it means that when I write something down, people look at me like I'm a madman.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
With that fucking dumb G.
They don't even tell them that it existed or anything?
No.
This is crazy.
He doesn't know what it is. He's like, because by the way, they all have laptops and iPads. Like they're barely.
You're right. I can't believe it. It's so weird. Like some of these changes are so insane that here's when I love technology. I grew up with it. So I'm always excited about evolutions in technology. What doesn't excite me is when it feels like pieces of my existence are being erased.
I completely agree. Like it's just like the writing thing where it's like, but that actually is important. You need that for memorization. But then you go to talk about doctors in college and they go, well, they don't, because they grew up with it differently. Yeah. They learned typing before they learned writing. So it's the opposite. And you're just like, what the
holy shit?
Fuck?
Yeah, man, it's weird. I think that's why it's so hard for guys to get older. Like I grew up, I didn't have the greatest dad. So I started playing golf because I ended up hanging out with a lot of old guys and it was nice for me. And so I ended up playing golf one time with these 3 old black guys and this old black dude named George, who was a retired engineer at JPL, this engineering firm. He said, why do you think we have more access to intelligence than any other time in history, but we keep doing dumber and dumber things? And I said, I don't know. Because you got the internet in your pocket, but we still have stupid things going on in society because of young people. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, it's not your fault. It's how you're being used. He said, the internet is where you get all your information, but the most underrepresented group online is old people. So you're getting information, but not wisdom.
Oh,
and I was like,
right.
And it hit me right in the gut. And then he goes, that's why corporations use young people exclusively in all their commercials, because young people are the best consumers. They don't do research. They make decisions emotionally. They want what they want and they want it now. And that's how they want you to behave. And then I ended up writing a joke out of it where I go, imagine how much less dramatic life would be if there were more old people on TV. Like an old guy on Maury Povich, where he'd go, you are the father. And he's like, great, I'm ready.
Yeah. I've been saving for this for years, and I was a bit concerned that I was barren, actually. That's a very good joke.
It's so weird.
Also, the fact that do you know how old Maury Povich is?
I don't get him, man. He's got to be close to 80?
He's in his 80s.
Wow.
He's been on television.
What's his motivation?
I think he just loves it.
Does he really?
But he's probably got that show down to a science. Like he probably shows up 5 minutes before tape time.
Yeah.
They hand him those cards. Boom, pops out, and he's in a car.
He's such a fancy man, and these are such it's like the worst things happening to people. It's almost like embarrassing things. It's like things that they're going to be embarrassed of when they get off that TV show.
Yeah, completely.
And it doesn't affect him like
that. It's probably his golf or something. It's like how what the fuck is Alex Trebek? What does he do? He's still on that show, and he's now finally announced he might be stepping down, maybe. That's like
crazy.
You don't need, he's not needed the money in 20 years. Yeah. Pat Sajak's another one. Like, that guy has got to have boats upon boats, and he's just like, I think they just like it at a certain point.
Yeah, it's like a drug. I think that's what it is. It's like they're those old guys that if they stop drinking, they die.
Oh, yeah. That's my every 110-year-old. What do you eat? Back bacon that I put sugar on, 2 packs of
bacon.
Marlboro 100s, and then Thunderburn wine, 5 o'clock. And then it's just like, it's just genetics. It's just genetics.
It's so true, man. It is genetics. I think there's some of it that you can control with like stress. I think stress is a legit thing. Sleep for sure. But you're right. It's genetics, man. Like I have an uncle in Egypt that he's in his 80s and he looks like he's in his 60s, and he got in a bar fight a week ago. Of
course,
he's in his 80s, and then my dad passed away at like 59. Like,
but that's the thing of like there's something about that the Mediterranean, that like Egypt, Greece, Italy is exactly, those are the 2 ages. They're either 111 and like survived Mussolini's purges. like worked for Franco. Spain's the same way, or like dead at 50. Like there's no in
You're so
between.
right.
There's no 75-year-old Greek man walking this planet. They're either 111 or 50. That's it.
Right. You're right. Well, on that note, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think you're going to be on a whole lot of more. There's going to be a bunch of people that are excited to have you in LA.
I'm looking forward. I do like LA. It's good for a couple of things. A, excellent street food. B,
that's true.
Everyone has a podcast, and they're all in studios. Like you go to the UK podcast, and it's like we're doing it in my kitchen. But here we've broken into like where they kept the ammo during the '92 riots.
It's still gangster in here.
Exactly right.
It's still gangster. So thank you guys for listening in. Please follow John Hastings. John, tell people where to find you, where to follow you.
You can find me everywhere is at the John Hastings. My website is thejohnhastings.com or johnhastingscomedy.com. Fucking cricketer has johnhastings.com. Everything else is thejohnhastings.com. And if you have the streaming service Next Up, I have a special on there called Integrity that
Awesome.
it's almost really good. I was trying something,
It is
guys,
really good.
and it almost worked, and that is a pretty good indication of it, but I fucked the order of the jokes up. So, yeah, check that out. And I'm doing 2 shows at the Soho Theatre in London, so if you're listening to this in the UK or you'll be in London, February 8th and 9th of 2018, buy tickets to that.
2019.
Fuck me, it's the future.
I'll be there in February, by the way. I'll be in London too.
Please
I'll come to the show.
People, because the room is too big. My management did their job and lied to some people, and now I have to make this a truth. Bring everyone's friends. We need to sell out a 150-seater twice in London. So during rugby season, it's going to be a disaster.
It'll happen. I have a feeling. I have a vibe. I'm part gypsy.
Ooh, which we can say here because they don't exist in California.
Exactly.
I don't have to say the Romani people like a fucking professor.
No, I'm a friend of them's. See, I haven't said it the way that they say. I've been boxing gyms around California. There's still some Romani.
Oh, of course.
Romani gypsies. Yeah, and I'm a friend of them, and they're a friend of me. So and because if I wasn't, I'd be scared to walk out that door. Romanis are very tough dudes. But thanks for listening. Thanks for being on, John. Follow this guy. Watch his comedy.